Welcome, everyone, to the Mushrooms Apprentice. I am so excited for this episode because I have my very dear friend, Vanese McNeil, here. And if you don't know who Vanese is, you need to know. She is the producer of Magical Egypt, which is an extraordinary series. And that website is magicalegypt.com. And they're up to season 4 now, I believe. And so they also have a Substack and they're on YouTube. And then Vanese has her own Substack under Vanese McNeil. And this woman is such an amazing writer. And she reads just constantly. She has a wealth of information. And she is a high priestess of magic and wisdom and occult knowledge. I absolutely love this woman from my heart. So welcome, Vanese.
Oh, thank you so much, darling, for that introduction. Makes me sound so amazing. Hopefully I can live up to some of that. But thank you so much, darling. Look, you honestly are actually in Magical Egypt. We have to mention that because I'm just in love with you as well. So we have girl love going on here. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We're BFFs. That is for sure.
BFFs.
So well, I want you to start. You were talking about a book that you read a number of years ago that kind of took, it was like the lid coming off of Pandora's box, maybe. So you just take the floor, sweetie. Let's hear.
Yes, of course, my darling. You were asking me how all of my subjects are tying together of late. And because I am covering what might appear disparate subject matter, but they all kind of come down to several themes that are tightly interconnected. And they all stem from this idea that years ago, it's true, I was reading a book called Everything You've Been Told is a Lie. And I'm turning 60 this year. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's absolutely true. Everything from the things that doctors been telling us, the food has been telling us, the legal system is a lie. Like everything is absolutely a lie. And there's kind of no bigger lie, one that is so subtle. And it's kind of like we don't even notice it because we're like fish swimming in the ocean of the lie of materialism. And when you actually start looking at the layers upon layers upon layers of how materialism affects our reality, you start to understand that it is, first of all, on purpose, but it impacts every aspect of our reality in terms of our sciences, in terms of our medicine, in terms of our healing, in terms of our interconnection with each other and our ability to communicate, in terms of our dreams, in terms of things like cities, of the reality of telepathy and telekinesis, and all of these kinds of things. All of this stuff that's not allowed to be discussed and researched and studied is all because of this big bowl of materialism that we're kind of stuck in because the powers that be decided 300 years ago that it was going to be better. And look, there were some good things that came out of it, right? We have progressed technologically. Materialism is great for technology, really great for technology. And we have amazing technology. But the cost of that is the thing that kind of leaves me with a big feeling, and how much of the pie that's been left out of it. And so that's kind of the thing that ties it all together.
Yeah. Well, it's like they left wisdom behind. Like they traded wisdom for materialism. So even like with the weather, which is completely orchestrated now and artificially created, you've got silly military boys playing with the tools of the gods, essentially. That like they have these extraordinary godlike technologies and zero, and I mean zero wisdom inclusive.
Well, I made a comment to somebody the other day with the statement that I want to be able to say, forgive them for they know not what they do, but they do. Right. Like the problem is that, we could say, oh, they're just, like you said, silly boys. Okay. Silly boys that don't understand. And I'm particularly thinking a lot about Elon Musk and his AI efforts to AI the government right now. And as somebody who's played along with AI, that is petrifying, the idea that they're going to turn the government into an AI machine, because the AI machine at my desktop is mostly wrong, right? So if that's government, then it's going to be very, very terrifying situation. But in this journey, and particularly in season 4, what we've done is in season 4, it's kind of crazy. We're really going off script. We're going into magic, which is why you're in the show, because you are such a wonderful magi. But part of the question that came up for us is that all throughout history, throughout since the cave paintings up until about 300 years ago, humans have been familiar and utilized magic. And all of a sudden, it was taken out of our reality. And so we were trying to understand why. Why is that so? And then we thought, okay, it's because materialism, they wanted technology and blah, 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 blah. But we came to find out that if that's true, then why did all the wealthy families, the kings and the queens and all of these kind of people keep doing magic, but we weren't allowed to be doing magic? And that was kind of a nail in the coffin of the whole magic thing's not real, for one thing. Because if the wealthy people are kind of doing the magic, then there must be something to it. And then we just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And then when you understand that it is absolutely deliberate, then the natural thing is to start exploring what are the things that we've lost, what is it that they don't want us to have, and that's kind of how we get to all of these subjects. And so, for example, one of the things that I've been trying to do is understand the mechanism of magic, right? Like, what is the underlying mechanism? Because one of the things that we do have today is that with all of this scientific technology, like, the thing that kills me, the thing that really makes me laugh, is that you have these incredibly brilliant people that come on and they argue infinitum about the hard problem of consciousness and all the ramifications, and all of our science is kind of set up on this one big question of, like, how come, what is qualia? How do we have qualia? And it's because, if you think about it, because they're stuck in the materialist prism, they can't even imagine thinking that it has to do with consciousness being primary. And if you just literally turn the pyramid upside down, everything opens up and everything makes sense. And on this journey, I'm not the first person, obviously, to have thought about turning the pyramid upside down. And when you do that and you start looking for people throughout history that have turned the pyramid upside down, they're going to be the physicist, the psychologist, the scientist, the doctor who has been persecuted, put in jail, um, had their life stripped away from them, or generally murdered. Okay, so
Yeah.
all of these people throughout history, like Tesla, that have turned the pyramid upside down and come from the opposite, that consciousness is primary, have been persecuted. And that's another reason why you come to the idea that this has to be kind of a deliberate thing. So there's all of these renegades out there. I love renegades that have investigated all kinds of things about the nature of reality. And I'm following their trails. I'm kind of hoping to stand on their shoulders a little bit and put a puzzle together that gives us a different perspective about what reality is and how we can interact with it. And that's kind of my passion at the moment.
Yeah. Well, you've been on fire with your talks on YouTube, like just really, really, really good stuff and really connecting the dots. So I'm going to have you talk a little bit about Mr. Bentov.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Itzhak Bentov. Well, first of all, I'm a bit slow, right? So for years, people have been saying to me, you have to read Itzhak Bentov, because I'd ask them a question. Like, starting, I guess, in 2018, I started talking to people like yourself, people that are living magical lives, are doing magical things, and other people that have really academically researched it, but not necessarily can do the things that you can do, but they're really book smart in it. And so I've been asking lots of questions, and people were like, "You have to read Itzhak Bentov," and I picked it up, and I looked at the first thing, and it was like maths, and it was like physics, and I'm like, oh. And I kind of threw it away. And I really didn't even, it's not even that bad, right? It's really, now that I've read it several times, it was just my own psychological barrier. But he was in the 70s, really interesting story. In the 70s, kind of a physicist, but not a traditional physicist, not an academic physicist. He was just this really smart guy that figured out stuff and wrote a book about it. And after he did, he was able to do one television appearance, and then, oh no, his plane crashed and he died. Okay. Now, this book is, or the man has become infamous because there is this document floating out in the ethers that was done by the CIA that is called the Stargate program. And the Stargate program was a program that was developed by the government to try to figure out how this remote viewing thing was happening. And so they put a kernel on it to kind of do all the research that they could find out to kind of make sense of how these people are doing, like Ingo Swann, who I adore, who I'm also crazy about, how these people were doing this remote viewing business. And so this kernel went out into the marketplace, and he found Itzhak Bentov's book, and he incorporated basically some of the, I'm going to call it metaphysics, in the Stargate document. And so that's why it's kind of got a bit of a buzz going on now, because people are looking at the CIA document. But basically what Itzhak Bentov is talking about is that there are layers of, let's call it reality, based on the quality and consciousness of perception of individual, or of beings. Okay. And so he talks about that, basically, as far as he's concerned, everything has consciousness, because if you take an atom and you annoy it, it's going to jump an electron. Okay. And so for him, that is a sign of reactivity to stimulus, which is a sign of consciousness, right? So even in our science, our smallest thing reacts to something. So it has some degree. Now, the quality of consciousness, right, that an atom has is disputable. We can say it can do one action. So its quantity and quality of consciousness is very small. But as you increase, like a virus has more ability to act and to respond. And then a fish has more, and then a dog has more, and then a human has more. And there's a spectrum of consciousnesses that go up, right? And even within humans, we can see it very vividly. For example, if somebody gives me a painting and says, describe the painting, I might say, there's a woman in a red dress sitting in a chair. But if you have my husband, who is a very, elevated artist, look at it, he'll say, it's a autumn day and the shades of the light are coming in the window. He'll describe it with just so much more detail, right? So his level of consciousness in that realm is so much more significantly greater than mine. Okay. So that'll kind of give you an idea of the spectrum within humanity. Okay. We have what we call the NPCs, and we have the people that are vibrantly alive. So the quality of consciousness, even amongst humans, is so different. But then he talks about layers beyond that, where there are intelligences that exist as well. And the more that the higher you go up on this graph, the more ability to impact reality and to understand reality and affect reality is gained. So recently, there's been a lot of hoo-ha about autist children that seem to have telepathy, for example. And I don't know if you're familiar with the telepathy tapes, but if you haven't listened to them, my gosh, my darling, it's amazing. So the telepathy tapes is a story about individual parents and teachers all over essentially America, but probably the world, that privately in their own home had a suspicion that they're autist. They like to be called autist. The
Mhm.
autist children were communicating with them telepathically, so that the children seemed to understand what the parents were thinking. And occasionally the parents and teachers would get direct messages in their inside of their heads from the children. And so individually these parents around the world were like, I think I'm communicating telepathically with my child. And then this woman goes around and starts interviewing them. And all of a sudden, we find that it's not just this one family, that so many autist children all over the world are communicating telepathically, not only with their caregivers and parents and teachers, but they have these communities in these astral planes where they all go and communicate with each other and teach each other languages and all kinds of things. And so there's this whole crazy network of telepathic children that exist on, let's call it an imaginal plane, and they're communicating with each other. So Itzhak Bentov explains how that would happen. You know what I'm saying? Like Itzhak Bentov's metaphysics says, oh, of course, if I understand that there's levels of reality, and depending on your nervous system and your quality and quantity of consciousness, you can access these different realms. Well, then the telepathy children make perfect sense. They're just on this band of reality that is above our band of reality because of this certain tweaking of their nervous system that is not necessarily fun in the material plane, but gives them an incredible advantage on a plane beyond the material, right? And so this is why I love Bentov, because it's like, okay, I can make sense of why my friend can speak to water because of Bentov. I can make sense of why I have the coolest girlfriends. I have one girlfriend who is able to download knowledge from the fairy realm in the most beautiful, poetic way. And Itzhak Bentov makes sense of that. I have another girlfriend who levitated as a child, and Itzhak Bentov makes sense of that. I have another girlfriend who speaks to water, and Itzhak Bentov makes sense of that. So that's why I'm crazy for Itzhak Bentov, because his crazy physics that is renegade makes sense of all of these things to me, and that's why I love him.
Is this what we would call multidimensionality? Because I'm thinking those autist children sound like they're multidimensional.
Well, I for me, I'm going to say yes, but for me, I think a really great way to explain it is if you think about the visible spectrum of light, okay, that we see. So when you think that there's a spectrum of, I don't know what they're called, but like light goes into ultraviolet and the red and and further, okay? And so as humans, our sight goes into this range, this very, very skinny range. Like if you think about it, it's like 1 minute on the clock of the spectrum of light. And for example, cats are so interesting because their sight overlaps with ours, but it goes a little bit further. And so when the cats are like playing with something that we can't see, they can see it because their vision is slightly on a different scale. And I think the autistic children are in our realm, but they're also slightly like the cats, have a broader range of just general perception,
Right.
and their organs of perception are wider. Like I told you about Ingo. So Ingo, oh my God, so love Ingo. And about 2 years ago, I did a document based on one of the probably most important parts of Ingo's research. And I called it Our Superpowers. And so what Ingo did is Ingo was a natural clairvoyant, and he had his vision, like the cat's, was wider than ours, and he could see all kinds of crazy things. And he was probably one of the best remote viewers that we've ever had in reality. And he was also very materialist in the respect that he wanted to have a scientific explanation for it. And he was driven to scientifically understand what was going on. Okay. And of course, I mean, he was probably alive at the peak of materialism. Like we're actually starting finally to move away from it. But in the 70s, that was probably peak materialism. And so what he did is he went out into the universe and was trying to find all the science that pointed to phenomena that would explain his ability to do this and all of the other things. And all of the other things, I'm going to use a term called siddhis to explain it. So in the Indian school of ancient knowledge, they use the word siddhis to describe superpowers that human experience, like levitating, like telepathy, like telekinesis, like all of these things. We call them psi today, which I hate that word, but back in ancient India they called them siddhis, right? So he went out, and what he did is he found all of this science about different kinds of scientifically proven abilities that human have, and he came up with like 250 receptor systems that humans are able to perceive through chemical receptors and the liquid in our body and hairs on our ears and all kinds of things that are scientifically proven. And so things like the ability, it's scientifically proven that humans can feel heat 3 miles away, right? And it's scientifically proven that, in fact, they just did a big study that humans are able to pick up the magnetic field like the birds, right? And all of these things he found in the 70s, right? And his thing is that they just haven't been nurtured. So 250 superpowers we have, and you'll come across people in your life that have naturally developed them, like you, Shonagh, right? You naturally have a talent that I don't have in without working on it, okay? And other people that might be psychic or clairvoyant, or other people that do, things. There are people in the world, and generally we call them psychics, right? That have naturally had this talent come to the fore, and they put a shingle on their door and they do psychic readings. But those people just happen to be more naturally gifted. And the example that I like to give is that you, Shonagh, could play guitar, and I, Vanese, could play guitar. And my husband is a maestro guitarist, and that's because he plays guitar at least 1 hour every day. And you and I probably haven't picked up a guitar, for more than 10 minutes in our lives. But it doesn't mean that we can't play a guitar. It means we haven't applied ourselves to it. And this is the point that Ingo says, is that we haven't been taught that these things even exist. And the people that have them naturally have been pushed to the fringe of society. It's almost as if they don't want us to nurture these abilities, right?
Okay.
Okay, so these autist children, and we won't even go to how did this happen to them, but naturally their nervous systems have been tweaked in a way that this predominance but the predominance of this ability that we all have has been superpowered. Okay. And so they're literally just manifesting an ability that we all have. And it's kind of interesting. My father was blind, and they say that when you're blind, all of your other senses enhance. And it's kind of true, because he could taste better and he could smell better. Like he was a champion wine taster, right? They'd give him a wine and he'd be like, it was grown in 1986 in Wodonga, Albury. And they're like, oh, because his taste buds were so good, right? And that was because he was blind. So that part of his perception system enhanced so much. So these autist children, because their ability to communicate and all of that has been clamped down, their other senses, their other organs of perception, that's where I was going, their organs of perception that we all have been more highly tuned to allow them to do this natural communication. And look, the story goes that all the creatures on earth have this ability to communicate, to to communicate via telepathy. And it's only us humans really that are left out of the game. Okay. And so now these autist children are coming back onto this level and communicating within the what should be probably the great level of communication for all of the beings on planet Earth. And
You
we just
call
have
it
to.
the inner net.
I love that, darling. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
That is a
I mean, that would
perfect.
be the living intelligence, as it were, as opposed to the artificial.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I love that because it is true. It's like you go inside, like all of these kids are going in. I love this part of the story. They call it the hill, and they go inside and they hang out on the hill. And there's another piece here that's really, really interesting. So I did a podcast. One of the dark parts of my history is that my first husband invented the psychic hotline. And so I had to test and manage 3 to 5,000 psychics in a short period in my life. And so I became very, 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 very familiar with the whole psychic phenomena more than I probably would ever have wanted to. And so I did a podcast on that the other day. And the one unifying thing about that was that all of these people that worked for me had undergone and survived some kind of trauma. They were all survivors of the most horrible things that humans do to each other and ourselves. Okay. So they'd all kind of gone on that journey. And as a result of that journey, something in their nervous systems had adjusted and enabled them to go into and connect to the inner, what did you call it? The inner, no,
Internet. The inner,
internet.
opposed to the
I love
inter.
that. That's so good.
Because also, internet, if you break it down, it's to intern. Internet. To intern into a net. Whereas the inner net, it just makes more sense to me.
I love it. When you think about internet, I was actually talking to my husband this morning. Like it's like every day I get up and I get onto I'm interned in the internet. Like I'm just I plug into this thing, and it's not reality. It's not reality. It's not alive, right? It's not alive. It's terrible. We can go there too. But I love that internet. So these psychics, because of the trauma, it adjusted their nervous system to allow them to have more free access to the internet. Okay. And so we have this situation where there's trauma somehow leads to it. So these autist kids were working with a normal young man who had survived cancer and all of these kinds of things. He was a gifted young man in the respect that he had this terrible cancer and figured out how to stop it himself, right? Utilizing consciousness and all of these things, but primarily he worked with his mind to have the cancer turn off, and he survived. And so when he was working with these kids and they were talking about this internet, he's like, I want to come to the hill. And so one night he's practicing and anyway the child, he hears chatting and he kind of follows it. And he's like, "Oh, am I here? Am I on the internet? Am I on the hill?" And so he's like, all of these children that he knew but was never able to speak to, he knew immediately that it was them because their energy was Shonagh energy, right? So even though I'd never actually heard you talk, I knew it was Shonagh. And so he's like, "I'm dreaming. This can't be real. I'm getting goosebumps. This can't be real. Tell me something that only like you could tell me." And so 3 days later, he goes back to the autist children where he was working, and when he was on the hill, the child said, "My mother's Olivia and my father's Ben," or something. I can't remember the exact names, right? So 3 days later, he goes back and they have the person in the middle, and he's like, his mother's Olivia and his father's Ben. And they're like, "Oh my God, that's right. How did you know?" And it was proof that the child had talked to him on the hill. Now, he was able to do it because he had had such trauma in his life, surviving the cancer, that it had opened up his inner net and was able to actually make the leap. But these children are so beautiful, and they're saying we can all do it. We've just been shut down, right? And so it's just, wow, it's such a great story, such a great story. And it ties back into, again, the Bentov situation, right? Because he explains it. And so, yeah, so all of these little pieces, like, again, there's all these people on the internet saying, the telepathy tapes, that's not true. And they're making it up and they're faking it and da 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 da. And it's not possible. Like, it's not, again, I go back to, it's not possible. It's not possible in a materialist paradigm. Like, the one that's killing me right now is, let's go back to, is AI conscious, right? Is AI conscious? And there's this huge big discussion about, is AI conscious? And let's go back to, our atom is conscious. And if you electrocute the atom, it jumps an electron because it's having a reaction to the stimulus, which is Bentov's definition of conscious. And I think this is the thing. What is consciousness is something that hasn't even been defined, right? And so in materialism, our definitions, our ability to even have discussions like this, stymied by the fact that basically everybody has to come in and say, this is my definition of consciousness. Well, this is my definition of consciousness. Well, this is and they're all different. And then they just argue on their definitions of consciousness. And so we don't get anywhere. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. It makes me think also of how when I was young, I developed my clairsentience, which is the feeling, because I lived in this haunted house for 3 years. Yeah, eighth, ninth, and 10th grade, we lived in a haunted house. And I never discussed it with my mom, but she's as Irish as you can be, and she's very psychic herself. But I was in 8th grade, so we never discussed it. But every time I was in that house, every morning that I woke up, I'd feel the place because I could feel that ghost, and it entered the room because of course I was an early bird even at that age. So I would get up before anyone else and I'd be in the kitchen. And that door opened and closed once. Like, I heard it sliding open and close, and there was no one there. And so I naturally developed that ability. And then on top of that, God bless my sweet father, he had a drinking problem. And then so often, my parents would fight. So that would be on top of that, coming in the house and like feeling, all right, what's the vibe? Was there a fight? Or, like, what's going on? So this kind of thing definitely, okay, it's either through trauma, but even that trauma, it often goes over a period of time that I think the nervous system just adjusts or makes corrections or connections or something, right? To where you have this expanded ability.
Well, there's two things there. The first one, I'm going to start with the last one. Adult children of alcoholics is a huge category, okay? Because and I kind of make this point in my video, is it's not only that there's trauma, but that you're practicing your psychic ability every day for a long time so that you can feel the vibe. Am I going to have to hide in my bedroom to survive, or am I going to be okay today, right? And so you're practicing that part of that ability, that perception, on a long-term basis. And the other thing that I want to add to that is that children naturally are much more open to this. And it's not that we're not all born this way. It's that it's, mommy, I see a ghost. Oh, don't be silly. That's just your imagination. Okay. So when you see a 3-year-old, they're playing with ghosts. Like, I had Poik, who used to sit on the top of my door frame and would get me in trouble all the time. Like, Poik wasn't necessarily benevolent, but Poik was there. And I had to banish Poik. Like, as a child, I think I did my first magical ritual to banish Poik. But like, Poik was there. But it's just the parents and all the adults around us saying, don't be silly. This is not real. So instead, if there was an adult that said, talk to me about Poik, let's talk to Poik, you tell me what Poik's saying, we would practice these abilities more, right? So children naturally have it. It's just that the adults shut it down. And then the trauma, definitely, because you're practicing it over a long period. And so that enables that talent to really flourish.
Yes, exactly. So what have you come up with in terms of ways in which to develop this without the trauma?
Look, that's honestly something that I'm working on right now. But fundamentally, it's kind of boring. Um, the first thing is to, when it happens, not dismiss it. So the first thing that happens is you're like, oh, Shonagh's going to ring, and the phone rings, and you're like, oh, that's just a coincidence, right? Okay. So these things are happening to us all the time, all the way around us, and we just chalk them up to coincidences. And so the first thing he says is that realize, no, they're not coincidences, and call them what they are, your telepathic ability, right? And then it's a matter of essentially drills and practicing these things. Like I've got an app on my phone where it is kind of like predicting what the card's going to be before it shows up on your computer. Okay, so I'll say ace of spades, and it'll be ace of spades or not, right? And it's a drill, and I can tell that over time, my ability to predict the next card is enhancing, it's growing, right? Like I was actually pretty good. Like my the way I found out about it, I was telling all of this stuff to my niece's fiance, and he's like, oh, you think you're psychic, do you? And he handed me the phone. He's like, do this. And I'm like, beep, 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 beep. He's like, oh, you have a really high score. He was like going to show me, no, you're not psychic. And I'm like, and so as a result of that, I've been doing it now, and so drilling it. But eh, I think one of the biggest, okay, I keep talking about materialism. The word is, there's so when I used to be in advertising, right? And so I would sell things to people, and I would be like, this new widget's going to shift your paradigm. It's going to change your world. And it's kind of like the word paradigm has become so nothing burger, right? Like you hear it all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, yeah, paradigm, I get it. But the reality is that I thought for a moment I might write a book, and I wrote down all of the ways that this materialistic paradigm keeps us in a cage. And it literally blew my mind. Everything from the ecology, right, to our, like how we look after our planet, how we treat our skies. We were talking about chemtrails before, how we treat our water. Like when my friend Veda really got me to grok in a really tangible way that water's talking to her. All of a sudden, when you flush the toilet, you're like, oh, you have a guilt conscience. You feel guilty, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm flushing a sentient being down the toilet, right? So if we can shift our paradigm, if we can actually open up to the idea that our reality is very different than the reality that we've been told in the first place, all of this stuff opens up. All of this stuff. And we were talking a little bit before about the plasma thing that I'm on. Okay. So also on a plasma journey at the moment. And I was reading in this book, The New Science of Heaven, which is a phenomenal book. And it's full of renegade scientists, like those scientists I was talking about before, full of those mind blowing stories. But there was one line in there, and he said, basically the matter that we're obsessed with in our reality, the matter that's atomic matter that constructs you, me, this, the cars, the physical money that we're playing with, the computers that we're obsessed with, we're plugged into, is only less than 5% of the entire universe. That matter is actually a perversion. It's such a small part of what the entire universe is made up of, and it makes up 100% of our obsession. And it's been a boon because it's enabled us to develop technology. But as you said, it stripped meaning from every level and aspect of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so highly limiting as well. I mean, it just puts you in this limited paradigm, if I can use that word. And
Well,
then,
that's what it is. It's a limiting, it is literally, I called it the materialistic prison paradigm. And people got mad at me because during COVID, I did basically a podcast series and I kept rambling on about the materialist prison paradigm. But it's a mind prison. As I said, when the smartest people on the planet are arguing over something that all you have to say is materialism's wrong and everything makes sense. But they can't, they literally physically cannot do that. They cannot do that. And then people like Rupert Sheldrake, who's duh, banned from TED Talks. How dare you? How dare you suggest that that's wrong? You know what I mean? Literally, it's insanity.
yes. And the imagination of children is shut down at a very early age. That's one of the many purposes of public schooling. To
Yes.
shut down the imaginal. You've been doing so much on the imaginal. And I will just say we talked about this last year, but in someone's book, I was shamed under a different name for having this limitless imagination. And it was, written in such a way as, to completely dismiss all my work as sort of
Put
nonsense.
it this way, darling. I consider that a badge of honor because I'm not going to be interested in you or anyone that is not flagellated by the mainstream. You know what I mean? If the mainstream likes you, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, no,
there's
no, no.
something missing.
This was a mainstream, even though they were sort of worked with psychedelics, there's a very mainstream secular indoctrinated person.
Yes.
But it's just a microcosm of this greater false reality or construct that we're in, where the imaginal is utterly dismissed as just kind of nonsense. It's like, all right, back to work, get back to the quote unquote real world. So this is the problem, is this association with sort of the material is the real world. Everything else is just conjecture. And obviously, yeah, we can't see that with the naked eye necessarily unless we're clairvoyant. We've got the clairs. We have these
Yes.
abilities that are naturally in
Look,
it.
we did a first of all, this is a huge this is such a huge mind-blowing topic that I don't even really know how to contend with it because we were talking about dimensions before, okay? And for me, the imaginal is more dimension than what we were talking about before, okay? And it seems like there is a level of reality. So, okay, so everybody dreams, all right? So we all dream. We all know that there's a reality in which we dream and it's as real as anything. And if we get run over by a car, or if we can have the hottest sex, or we can have our parents and start crying because we know they're dead, but they're there, but it's real and you can talk to them. Like dreams have this really weird thing that you wake up and it's like, oh, that was a good dream. Or, you know what I mean? Like it's so real. Like when you wake up, you know you had a dream. So we're okay with that. And we're okay with this reality. Like we think this is real and that's okay. It's not real, but it's okay. And between those two, there is another reality, okay, which has the persistence of this reality in the respect that if this table was in the imaginal yesterday, it's going to be in the imaginal tomorrow, unless, like in this reality, somebody comes physically, picks it up, and moves it, right? But it also, so things go in dreams. It's like I can have a dream where I'm in Rome, and then the next dream I'm in the 1840s in Paris, and then the next dream I'm in the future in, you know what I mean? Like there's no continuity to it. But in the imaginal there is, right? There's a continuity and things continue. And what I'm trying to get at is there's a whole realm that we have access to that doesn't exist. It just doesn't like it doesn't and it doesn't matter that J.R.R. Tolkien went there and wrote a whole book about it, and it doesn't matter that Jung, like the prophet of our time, went in there and got so much of his wisdom out of it, and it doesn't matter that the Taoists, the Chinese, have used it for healing and magic for the entire time there's been Chinese history. But no, it doesn't exist.
Right. And then you also have Victor Schauberger, the water wizard, who, as a child through his teens, would just sit by the river in the mountains and just gaze into the water to where his consciousness left with the water. And when it returned, it gave him all those brilliant ideas that he then applied and then was, of course, persecuted horribly for it. But to your point, and he said we're missing out on this vast piece where we can explore. We have the ability to explore in this way. But
Look, it's kind of crazy. Like we have, these cartoons of these indigenous Americans that throw their consciousness into a crow and they fly over the landscape. And we're like, wow, that's such a great idea. Who thought of that for a cartoon? And it's like, no, they can do that. You know what I mean? Like it's not somebody invented this idea for a cartoon or a movie, or for a Disney movie, right? It's like these the the limit of what humans are actually capable of, I think, is the very reason for the materialist paradigm, the materialist prison paradigm, because people don't want us to know their secrets. They don't want us to know our power. And that's the whole game of cards here, right? That's literally the whole point, is that we are. And one of the things that I've been struggling with is that in season 4, we're talking about magic. And the word magic itself has been so polluted, diminished, distorted, fantasized, that if I'm just talking to a normal person at a restaurant and they're like, "What are you doing? Your document magic?" They're right. And so people don't fundamentally understand what magic is. And so I'm probably going to have to use a different word. But what I'm really talking about is all of these superpowers that we are capable of, all of these things that we can do, that we have done for ages, that have been literally stolen from us. And we're just starting to rediscover them now. And the crazy thing is, like AI, like Elon Musk literally just trademarked telepathy. I'm like, how the F can you trademark something, a word and a thing that everybody like how do you even do that, right? So these AI guys are trying to AI and technofy all of these actual abilities that we already have, and they're trying to give them back to us with a chip in our head.
yeah, it's artificial. Right. Right. Well, essentially, they are playing God, because with God, or however you want to think of that creative force, it's free. It's free for
Yes.
all of us. There's no charge. Well, unless we want to play with that we're electric beings, and indeed there is a charge, a very, very high charge. But these guys, that's why it's artificial. Like that's not how the creator works. We don't have to pay for our abilities. And also, I think of also this AI, the whole surveillance piece, compared to the Akashic records,
Yes.
where it's like every thought you've ever had, every deed, everything, it's in the Akashics, but not as a like this kind of thing, and not as a like we're going to punish you and continue. No. it's free for all to experience and learn and what, but then you've got this surveillance, which is back to your point about the prison material paradigm.
Paradigm. Chance calls it, I just want to say this word, the digital doppelganger, because everything that we are in reality, they're creating a digital doppelganger reality for us, right? So instead of the Akasha, there's surveillance state. You're absolutely right, darling.
Yes, but this is interesting because, gosh, maybe 10 years ago or something, when I would take these mushroom journeys and the beings I was speaking to, I remember this so well, they were mocking the Elon Musk. They were mocking them because yes, their technology is shiny and interesting and wondrous in some ways, but it's shite because it's not real. And also it causes problems. Like whoever designed this living planet, it's systems, it's countless systems that somehow seem to be able to operate without like throwing the whole thing into disorder and chaos.
Well, when you actually start looking at that, it's not even really true because I have this really super smart friend who actually turned me onto um the New Science of Heaven book, and his name is Thomas Joseph Brown. And he turned me onto another book, and I can look up the name of it. But basically, every time there has been a major advance in our technology, there has been a price to pay. So in World War II, or one of the world wars, so don't quote me, I'm not very au fait on this, but they invented radar. And what happened was uh, everybody got sick, right? And so these things like cancer that we're suffering now more than ever are all a result of these different technologies, the electrifying of the planet, and
Yes,
that kind of
yes.
thing. So,
Arthur Furstenberg talks about that in The Invisible Rainbow.
oh, that's it. That's the book. Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So the electrification, these new advancements in technology, and that's why I said I wish I could say forgive them for they know not what they do, but they do know.
I don't
Like
care.
they're putting things like 5G doesn't have to be on 5G, but 5G just happens to be the signal that aligns with our nervous system in the ability to manipulate our nervous system. And so, isn't that funny that they're putting this network out there at the same frequency range as we are? Like,
Also, five is the number of man.
wow, yes, that's true.
Know the true
Yes.
being man. One, two,
I was
three,
going
four.
to say, yeah. It's crazy, right? Like it's people. I had a neighbor in Australia, and just because these are things that I'm interested in, and he's like, "Don't tell me. I don't want to, like, don't tell me any of the things that you're researching because I just don't want to know. You're going to make me do something." And that was when he was not calling me, "Oh, you're crazy." Like when we got through that, that's crazy. That would never happen. They would never do that. Like I told him, like, the simplest level of, when you put money in a bank, you're giving them an unsecured loan. Do you realize that? Do you realize that? Because he just sold a house and he's putting millions of dollars in the bank. And I'm like, you're just giving your bank $1 million. And so if you want to get your money back, they don't necessarily have to give it back to you because it's an unsecured loan. And he's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, dude, give me a glass of wine if you want to think I'm crazy. Let me see. That's nothing. That's literally nothing because the rabbit hole is so incredibly deep. That's the problem. Like I have this, I think even like 10 years ago, I wrote a list of beliefs that are going to have to change for people to understand, let's say, the bank thing, right? That you have to believe that. And now we're coming a long way. Like 10 years ago, the idea that the media would lie to you, it was just like, but it was just like like now we're making headway, baby, right? But 10 years ago, the idea that doctors would hurt you, like those things, and the list is getting, people are moving through the list, right? We kind of generally don't trust the media. We generally look at our doctors with a little bit more suspicion now. But as I said, the paradigm, it's so ubiquitous, right? It's like we're fish in water, and you have to literally get out of the tank to be able, like, oh wow, okay, now I get it. And like it's a big mental shift. And as I said, it kills me that the smartest people on the planet can't seem to do it. And they can sit there with Rupert Sheldrake, like smart guy to smart guy, having smart guy conversation, and having Rupert try to, and they can't get it. Like, just does not
That's
compute.
because they're indoctrinated. They go to institutions and they're indoctrinated. And I remember years ago, my mentor, my law mentor, he was very funny. He dropped out of high school at 16. He's the smartest person I've ever met in my entire life. I mean, absolutely just brilliant. And just obviously too smart for public school, which was just a joke. And then he studied law and he became quite the scholar of law. And I remember talking about one of my friends, and I said, "Oh, she's really smart. She went to Stanford." And he said, "You say that like it's a good thing." And then I realized, I was like, "Oh, right, you're right. You're right. I get it. I get it." So yes, they take our best and brightest and they indoctrinate them. And then it shuts down their ability actually to think critically. Sorry,
Yes.
guys, but it's true.
Look, it's one of the interviewed this guy his name is Tobias Churton. He's a magic guy in the UK. And we've kind of identified the Enlightenment as the period where the degradation of this knowledge occurred. And he said, Enlightenment, you should call it the Great Blackout. And that's when I'm like,
I
right?
agree.
Like, it really was when all of this stuff got started to get packaged up. And then the Industrial Revolution was another peak of that, because we can't have people dilly dallying out with the fairies when we want them working in on the machines. God damn it, right? So that was another big period where all of this stuff, and machines are the new thing.
Well,
And
all of it was a clever sales job. Like to
yes,
call all of that the Enlightenment.
I know the Enlightenment. I know.
It's a con.
Oh, but you don't even, like, until you hear it, right? Like all this time, the Enlightenment, the Enlightenment, the Enlightenment. Yeah, and like all of these thinkers have been lauded. And here's one of the biggest pieces, I think. This is kind of an obtuse statement, but I'm going to apply this to myself, is that we all think we know, not like we all think we know things, okay? We all think, oh, I know what the Enlightenment is because we heard about it at school, right? And it's the Enlightenment, it's the great thinkers of our time. And the truth is that things are so much more complicated. And the story that we've been told, I go back to, everything we know is wrong, everything we know is a lie. The things that we've been told about it are so superficial. And so the other thing, Arkham Razor. So here to here makes perfect sense. It's the smallest line between two dots, so it has to be true. And the reality is like this, and truth is so much crazier and so much more complicated. And it's only when you actually take the time to really dive down into a subject that you understand it. And it's like drives me insane when I scroll through Facebook. And I'm going to state this by saying, Elon Musk is another one. Forgive them because they know not what they do with his AI bullshit, right? So I'm not a fan, is the point that I
Oh,
want to make. But when
God.
people put up this statement about Elon said this, and it's like, dude, it's not, the bad is 10 times worse than that, but it's not that simple little stupid thing that you're saying. You know what I mean? And you're showing your ignorance by lauding this stupid Elon said empathy is the problem. And it's like, okay, you want to go there? Let's start with some Sagard and get into the idea of he has a whole thing on empathy's been stolen, corrupted, exaggerated, and turned into a weapon, right? So there is a whole, at first blush, empathy is the problem with Western society. Looks like a horrible statement, but when you actually get down into it, there's layers and depth and truth inside there that he's just off the top of his head referring to, and all the people are going, what a monster. And yes, he is, but not for the reason that you're saying, right? And so this oversimplification of things, and where everybody thinks they know everything, is really a problem as well. It's like when these things come out, you'll notice on my page, these big travesties, I don't speak to them. I don't automatically regurgitate what the media or the alternative media is saying, because chances are they're both wrong. The story's deeper and you need to analyze it before you can even know what they're talking about, right? But we all know everything now. And so that's kind of a bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, I've always felt like the more I know or the more I learn, the more I realize the vastness of my ignorance. Like,
Yes.
there's so much to learn. And also, you have to practice such discernment because so much of it is absolute BS. So, I mean, it is like navigating the Wild West right now, especially this internet, whether it's mainstream, which is absolute nonsense, but so is probably most alternative, because they're running both sides. These
They
guys are
are.
life forcers. They've been at this game for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
You know,
They're literally running layers of it, right? You have your real crazy, crazy alternative media on both sides, right? And then you have your Candace Owens or whatever, on your whatever
I don't trust either.
that's what I'm saying. Like, but people are like, oh, she's alternative, so I trust her. And then you have MSNBC, right? And it's kind of like, dude, like, you think if they can control that, you don't think they can control the other layers of media as well. And like, this is where the internet really comes into play, because I think we're in a post-truth world. We're in a post-truth world. Absolutely. It's whatever is out there is not true. You need to take it inside and go onto the internet and use your discernment and your heart and figure out what is true, and
We also have the trivium for that:
yes,
grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
yes,
Which
that's gone
is
out the window.
another one that is absolutely not in the schools. It's not
Yeah.
in the university. It's no, you gotta seek it out. They don't
It's
want
it's
us knowing how to think.
It's an ancient artifact. It's something you can look up that those quaint little ancient people did to keep themselves entertained. How cute. Holy, it's just amazing, right? Like, I think my girl, so I'm 60 this year. My girlfriend, who's like 62 or 3, she had it in her Italian school. She was like the last class that had it in Italy. It was way gone in Australia, right? But she actually got taught it. And now I'm sure they teach it in the elite schools
Oh,
for
they
the
do.
elite
You can
elite.
bank
Yeah.
on it. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And then the homeschoolers, thank God. People, I didn't know about this. I would have homeschooled my kids if I had known then what I know today, but whatever, it is what it is. But
I remember when all the parents during COVID had to finally pay attention to what their children were
realize
being told.
how their minds, their children's minds were being poisoned and propagandized and a
It's like,
little.
this is what they're teaching you in school. Oh. But I mean, look, that I don't want to blame the parents. This is by design. Like, we were talking about the wealth gap before. And so I was telling Shonagh that back in like the 90s, I actually had this uniquely rare thing called disposable income, right? Where we could actually go to Vegas for the weekend and spend money, right? And that this doesn't exist for most people anymore, right? Most people are working 2 jobs to keep food on the table for their family. So it's not surprising that they don't have the bandwidth to be able to analyze every school paper that their kids are doing. It's like they're exhausted. Like they've the system has been set up to foil us basically every minute of the day. every minute of every day is our enemy when it comes time to even looking after our families the proper way. It's just, it really is quite unfair, Shonagh. And like if you sometimes when I really there's two incredibly crazy things going on right now. There's things have never been harder and more difficult and more untruth and more surveillance and more fascism and more all of the horrible things going on. And at the same time is speeding up, reality is shifting, possibility is increasing, and there's this kind of race to the singularity of, are we going to explode into this incredible new civilization, or are we going to blow ourselves up? And so I'm trying to stop thinking about the bad stuff, because energy goes where attention flows, and I'd rather put my attention on this amazing potential that is coming into our hands right now, because reality is no longer reality for anybody. Okay.
I think what you're talking about is the true Aquarian age. I mean, Aquarius, it's an air sign, and that's mind, that's spirit.
Yeah.
That's air's pretty expansive.
Yeah.
So whereas, yeah, you've got the schoolyard bullies, as one spirit I spoke to many years ago called them, which I love that. They want to keep it their way, and they want to run the Aquarian age their way. And so that's why gloves are off. They have their best people on it, yada yada. But then here you are, you're so right. All of this is coming forth anyway. All of this truth, if you will, is like springing forth. And I remember my law mentor telling me, he said, "Do you understand how many fires these guys are trying to put out? And they can't, like, it's too many." So, and fire also is a symbol of the mind. And
This is so true. Look, there's one of my favorite authors is Joseph Patrick Farrell, and he's a really big brain guy. And I'm going to tell you the story without telling you the word, but there's something like, the word is apocalypse, and the word apocalypse implies, kind of everything's going to blow up and revelation, but it has a negative connotation. It's not a good thing. But he said there's a word, and it's something like agro apocalypse or something, right? And he said what people don't tell you is that the other side of that is there's a word that says the absolute crap that happens before something beautiful is born. Right. And he's like, we're all focusing on the apocalypse, and we need to focus on, don't quote me, but the aggro apocalypse, right? Where it's like the shit that everything springs out of. Right. And he's like, that's where we are. And that's what I like to focus my attention on and bring into reality, is that, yeah, it's chaos, and yeah, it's shitty. But like you said, they're trying to put their hand around something that is just falling through their fingers, right? Like trying to squish sand. It's never going to happen, right? Or squish air. It's just,
my late teacher, Dr. Brew Joy, said something I never, ever will forget. He said, when the forces of change are upon us, it doesn't matter who thinks they're in charge or what's in place. These are forces. You can't contain a force.
no, no. And that's where, I don't want to go off on a whole other tangent, but that's where the plasma story comes in, right? Just
Okay, hang
no,
on.
because I know I don't want to
I
take all of
want
your
I
time.
want to get into the plasma. I want to get into the
Okay.
plasma. I want to get into ether. We're going to
Okay.
finish with the first hour, and I am
Okay.
going to invite people to come to Substack, and please subscribe to my channel, and there's really good material there. And this amazing woman is going to talk more about these very fascinating subjects, and I cannot wait to hear. So, all right, please join us. And again, your website, sweetie, magicalegypt.com.
MagicalEgypt.com. Yes, everything's there somewhere. You might have to dig for it. I kind of think about it as, it's kind of my website is an initiation in and of itself. Only those who are meant to find certain things will, because it's so complicated. so, so Magical
Also,
Egypt, everything's there.
and also this is gosh, where are we at now? March 13th. And you have a summit, the Magical Egypt Women of Wisdom Summit.
Yes, yes. Oh, yes. We may as well talk about that. So, one of the other things that's kind of happened is that um, women's voices through this journey of magical Egypt, we've got these amazing guys that are just like brilliant men. Magical Egypt's full of them, and people have been asked, ladies predominantly, where's all the women? And it's like, where are all the women? Like literally, where are the women's voices? And you turn on YouTube and it's like all the guys. And what I have found are some of the most brilliant, amazing women like yourself that have so much research and study and wisdom and practical experience, and they're doing amazing things. As I said, like levitating, like talking to water, and it's like nobody's ever heard of them. So I'm gathering them all up and I'm putting them into a conference. And the subjects that we're talking about are amazing. So, if you're interested in any of this stuff, come to magicalegyptwomen.com and have a look at who's talking and what they're talking about, because and I know you keep saying, oh, I can't wait to see this. They're really good subjects. They're really great topics that we're going over by amazing women. So yes, please come.
Yeah, yeah. I must say a lot of these summits kind of, you're sort of on summit overload, and a lot of them are just, I'm sorry, kind of boring. The speakers. Anyway, your speakers and the topics are fascinating. I cannot wait. I'm going to listen to every single woman on this summit. And I don't say that lightly because, whatever, time is limited, but this is time well spent. You
Look,
done.
I'm excited. I'm literally excited for the wisdom that is like basically there's nothing in this summit that I'm not fascinated by. Like I picked the people because I'm fascinated by them and their body of work. And it's a good excuse for me because, as I said, we're all so busy. It's a really good excuse for me to like deep dive into this stuff. And so some of the people are doing workshops, some of them are doing experiences. Like we have so much imaginal realm stuff in there. I never really put a pin into that, but that is one of the most exciting aspects of our reality. And so we have several women that are going into that. And so, yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. So, yay, come along, ladies, come along. And gentlemen, gentlemen are invited as well. Yeah, absolutely are. But it tends to be the ladies that are showing up. So, yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait. All right. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you guys on the Substack channel.